What's going on, guys? Joe here, aka Goaty. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be swapping out the processor on my Alienware Alpha R1 model. I'm going from an i3 up to an i7. It's a pretty big jump. Along the way, I've also upgraded my RAM, so we'll touch on that really quickly in the video too. It's all part of the same process. It's pretty easy. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe button below. I appreciate it. If there's any feedback, leave it in the comments. Love to hear from you guys. What was helpful? What could I expand on? How can I improve the videos? It's all helpful. Some things to try to be aware of in this video. We will be using a specific type of CPU. So the Alienware Alpha is a small form factor system, which means that it doesn't have as much power as a big old desktop does, and it doesn't also have the cooling capability. So if you're thinking about doing this process, go out and see if you can find the right type of processor first. What you want to do is you want to find the processor that you're looking for in a T model. That means that at the end of the numeric portion of like the i7 or the i5, it's going to have a T at the end of it. You might see some that have S's as well. Supposedly the S's will work in an Alienware Alpha. I haven't tested those, so I can't say that. But I know for a fact that the T models do. That's what comes in the Alienware. And really all that they have is lower energy requirements. So they pull less energy and they therefore create less heat. Those are what Dell ships the Alienware Alphas with. So they're your best bet. They're going to be a little bit hard to find. You can't just walk into a store and find a T model, unfortunately. What my best shot was looking around on eBay. Anything else that's really important to talk about before we start this video? Electrostatic discharge, ESD. If you haven't worked with electronics a lot before, this might be a new concept to you. Electrostatic discharge is what happens when you rub your feet across the floor and then you touch a doorknob and it shocks you. So anytime you're working with electronics, you really want to make sure that you don't have any built up electrostatic energy in your body. Before you start working with these things, go to a doorknob, just touch them, touch something metal that's grounded so that it's going to get that out of your body. This is something really important, guys. Even minute traces of electrostatic discharge in your body that you can't feel can fry components in electronics, so take it pretty seriously. Just be safe. Second thing that's similar to this, workspace. I did my build here on my solid wood desk. That would be my recommendation, something that isn't going to either retain or create electrostatic discharge. Don't do it on your carpet. Don't do it on your bed. Don't do it on like your lap and things like that. Just do it on wood, glass, tile, something that won't conduct electricity. One quick disclaimer, guys, working with electronics is always a little bit risky. I don't take any liability for you attempting to upgrade your system, obviously. I went through and did mine. This is literally the live run of me doing mine, and it was successful. Approach at your own risk. This video is going to give you step-by-step instructions, everything you need to know in order to swap out your Alienware stock processor with the i5 or i7 that you're upgrading to. So let's get into it. So there are a few things that you'll need for this process. Number one, your Alienware Alpha. This is my R1 version with an Intel i3 inside of it. We'll be switching that out for an i7. Number two, a Phillips head screwdriver. Number three, some thermal paste that you will put on the new processor when you reconnect the heatsink. And number four, some isopropyl alcohol and a clean kind of terry cloth or cloth that won't leave a lot of lint. We're going to use this to remove the already existing thermal paste that's currently on the heatsink for the i3. There are alternatives to this. You can buy little alcohol cleaning pads specifically. So the first thing we're going to want to do is remove the upper housing from the Alpha itself. In order to do this, we're going to flip it over, just set it down gently, and there are 4 screws, one in each corner, that you are going to use your Phillips head screwdriver to go ahead and remove. Once they are all removed, go ahead and collect them and just set them to the side. Now we are going to go ahead and flip the Alpha back over, and you're going to start by just sliding this upper housing off. If it catches a little bit, you may need to use your fingernail to just push down a little bit on the bottom edge of the housing, but it should pop right off. It might just take a tiny bit of pressure, but don't strong arm it too much. So now that the upper housing is removed, you can see the internals and the motherboard and the fans in the Alienware. Quick overview. So the front panel here is facing me. This is the power switch right here. We have two fans that are going to blow out the rear exhaust. The CPU fan here in the blower and the GPU fan in the blower here. We're going to be focused on the CPU housing over here on what is our right side. So in order to do that, what we want to do is go ahead and remove this big plastic black piece so that the fan comes off. There are two tabs on each side of these fans, and they are marked with little blue tabs. So what you want to do is just go ahead and pull them in a little bit, just squeeze, and it should pop right off. You just pull the housing for the fan and the blower off to the side. And now what you've done is you've exposed the underside of it. So what we want to focus on right here is this big black area. This is the heat sink for the CPU, for the processor itself. So we will be removing that as a next step. Pro tip, if you're interested in upgrading your RAM and you don't know how to do it, you would follow these current steps, and you're looking right here. This is the area where the RAM sticks are housed in the Alienware Alpha. Right now I have two of them. 4 gigs each to make 8 total gigs. You need laptop memory for this. It's a super easy exchange process if you're interested in doing it and upgrading your RAM. So the next steps are going to be to remove the heat sink so that we can expose the processor itself. We do that by removing these 4 screws in each corner. I like to remove them a little bit at a time, releasing pressure kind of as evenly as possible. And once all of the screws are loosened, you can just pull the heat sink straight up and off, and go ahead and set it to the side on a surface that is relatively clean. So now you can see the actual processor and the bracket itself. That's right here. So the bracket is the silver area going around it. We're going to want to loosen and release that. It is holding the chip in place below it. So in order to remove this, you're going to use this little lever arm on the side here. This is a pressure lever, and what you want to do is push down just a little bit and slide it out towards you, and you'll see that it just goes right ahead and releases, and everything kind of relaxes, and then the bracket comes up. So at this point, you're going to go ahead and pull the old processor out and replace it with the new one, so you should have your new processor and your thermal compound ready. Really detailed pro tip, when you're removing and replacing a processor, at least Intel processors, I think AMD are the same way. They have a corner marker, which you can see here, that is a more bold arrow. It's full. The other corners in these have small gold dots, but this one is specifically a triangle. That you're going to want to rematch back up again. You can see the motherboard behind it here a little bit. One of the corners on the board has a bolded white area where the other ones do not. That's how you know where you want to line this back up to. So we're just going to go ahead and reach in here and lift the i3 out. Now still be really delicate with that. You don't want to do any damage unnecessarily. And I am then going to take my new i7 processor. Again, lining up that arrow in the corner. And you just kind of drop it in place, and it'll seat right in there real easy. You don't need to worry about it a whole lot. And now we're really just going to undo the bracketing process. So lay this back down. It should fit kind of right under this screw here. So it should be real easy. And that's what's going to keep it in place. You're going to push the lever forward here, and it's going to start that repressurization process. So you press it down until you can get it under, and it just snaps back in there. And now the processor is seated, so that step is complete. I'm going to go ahead and clean up our heatsink here. You can see that it already has some thermal paste that was on there from the i3. I'm just going to take a clean towel and try to get a bunch of the big pieces off. I'm doing it away from the system just as a precaution. We'll see how much we can wipe off. Right now, this is just a dry cloth. And then eventually, once we get some of the big stuff off, we're going to add a little bit of the alcohol and clean it up totally. All right. Once you get most of the bulk thermal paste off from the old chipset, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to take a clean part of my cloth here and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. You don't have to soak this, just get it a little bit of a dab on there. And then we're just going to go through and try to clean off the rest of this, the finer stuff. Okay. And now a clean heatsink. All done. So now you have a new chip in a clean heatsink to add back on. So now what we're going to want to do is take our thermal paste and we're going to apply it to the new chip that you've just inserted. There are several methodologies for how to apply thermal paste to a processor. You can do some research on YouTube. There's different schools of thought. One dot right in the center of the chip. A star method where you do little ones on each of the corners and then one in the middle. I used to know people who did a dot and then a circle around that. The idea here is really to try to get as much surface coverage as you can without any gaps in between it, without it going over the edge of the processor. You don't want it to spill over the edge of the processor. Some thermal pastes, like Arctic Silver that I have here, come with a tool to help you kind of just spread it on. So what you can do is just put a dab in the middle and then take this tool and kind of, just paintbrush it across. So that can be really helpful if you are not experienced in this and you're not totally sure exactly how much to use. Okay, so I'm going to take my little tube here. What I'm going to do is just one little dot in the center. And take the tool that comes with my thermal paste. Okay, and once you get it applied without any gaps, what we're going to do is we're just going to take the heatsink and seat it right back on there. So line up the screws, drop it in. So make sure as you're putting this back on, you put it back on the same way. This little missing gap piece should be towards you, towards the power section in the front of the Alienware Alpha. And like I said earlier, what you really want to do here is to just distribute the pressure as you're snugging these down. They don't need to be in incredibly tight. You do just want them to be a little bit firm here. And you'll get to a point with all four of these where once you start snugging them down, they will kind of cut you off. You'll see them get firmed up and they can't be turned clockwise any farther. And that's how you know you're in a good spot. Okay, so now the last step is to just reseat this fan back on top. So we're gonna take it, set it right back down in kind of the back end first to get it in there. Watch out for all of the cords up in the front here. And all that you're going to need to do is squeeze these in so that it can kind of get in there. And then as you apply a tiny bit of pressure, it should just relatch itself back in there and you're all set. After that, we are going to put the housing back on. Flip it over. Take our screws and replace each of the screws into the 4 sockets that they belong in. All right, guys, and that's it. Plug it back in, turn it back on. Everything should be good to go. Again, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Give me any feedback that you thought of along the way. I appreciate you guys checking it out. Have a great day.